There is a particular kind of grief that nobody prepares you for. It does not come from a death. It does not come from a breakup, or a fight, or a single moment you can point to and say, "This is where it ended." It comes from something slower, quieter. You wake up one day and realize that a person who used to feel like home now feels like a room you have already left. And the strange, disorienting part is that nothing went wrong. No one did anything unforgivable. You simply grew, and they did not grow in the same direction. And now there is a distance between you that conversation cannot close. This is the kind of loss that comes with no script, no ritual, and almost no permission. Because if no one did anything wrong, who exactly are you supposed to grieve, and who are you allowed to blame? The answer that your mind keeps offering, in the absence of a better one, is you. You must be the problem. You must be the one who changed, who got colder, who stopped trying, who decided you were better than the people who shaped your entire life. That is the story shame tells when it has no other narrative to work with. And it is almost always the wrong story. To understand why outgrowing someone feels like betrayal even when it is not, you have to look at what psychologists call relational identity. Human beings do not develop a sense of self in isolation. From early childhood, identity is built in relation to others, to parents, siblings, friends, partners. Psychologist Erik Erikson, whose work on identity development remains foundational, argued that a stable sense of self requires a community that reflects it back to you. Your friends are not separate from your identity. In many ways, they are mirrors that confirm who you are. So when the relationship changes, it does not just feel like losing a person. It feels like losing a piece of the architecture that held your sense of self together. This is why outgrowing someone activates something far deeper than ordinary sadness. It activates threat. Not because the other person has become dangerous, but because your nervous system has learned to associate that bond with safety, and any disruption to it registers as a kind of instability, even when the disruption is exactly what your growth requires. Here is the part almost no one says out loud. Growth is not always mutual. It cannot be. Two people meeting at one point in their lives does not guarantee that they will be moving at the same speed, in the same direction, for the rest of their lives. Sociologist Robin Dunbar, known for his research on the limits and structure of human relationships, has shown that our closest social bonds shift continuously over a lifetime. Not because people fail each other, but because life stages, values, and circumstances are never static. The friend who matched your pace at 22 is not obligated to match your pace at 35. Neither of you failed. You simply diverged, the way two rivers that once ran side by side eventually bend toward different coastlines. The problem is that almost nothing in our culture teaches us how to let a relationship end without converting it into a moral failure. We have language for breakups. We have language for grief after death. We do not have language for the quiet erosion of closeness between two people who never stop caring about each other. So we borrow the only available framework, which is blame. Someone must have done something. Someone must be at fault. And because you are the one who walked away, even slowly, even reluctantly, the blame lands on you by default. This is where the idea of the villain enters. Psychologically, humans are deeply uncomfortable with ambiguous loss, a term coined by therapist Pauline Boss to describe loss that has no clear resolution, no funeral, no closure. Boss's research focused initially on families of missing persons, but the framework applies with surprising precision to friendships that fade without a defined ending. When there is no clear story, the mind manufactures one, and a villain is easier to live with than uncertainty. If you are the villain, at least there is a reason. At least there is a shape to the pain. But consider an alternative shape entirely. What if outgrowing someone is not a betrayal of the relationship, but evidence that the relationship did exactly what it was supposed to do? Friendships and partnerships are not static contracts meant to be held in place forever, regardless of who you become. They are, in the words of attachment researcher Sue Johnson, living systems that either grow with you or release you. And the releasing is not failure. It is simply what happens when growth outpaces shared context. There is also a quieter truth buried inside this kind of distance, one that is harder to admit. Sometimes you do not just grow apart from people. You grow away from versions of yourself that those relationships required you to maintain. The friend group that thrived on a particular kind of humor that no longer feels like you. The partner who loved a version of you that needed constant reassurance, a version you have since outgrown. The early mentor who related to you as someone who needed guidance, long after you stopped needing it. Staying in those dynamics does not preserve the relationship. It preserves a costume. And the discomfort you feel is not cruelty toward them. It is honesty toward yourself. This does not mean the ending has to be cruel, dramatic, or even spoken aloud. Most outgrowing does not require a confrontation. It requires acceptance, first from you, and ideally, eventually from them. The work is not in proving you did nothing wrong. The work is in releasing the requirement that someone be wrong at all. Two people can be good, and a connection can still end. Compatibility is not a moral category. It is closer to timing, to rhythm, to the simple physics of two lives moving at different speeds. If you are in this right now, sitting with the quiet grief of a friendship that has nothing dramatic to point to, here is what is true. You are not required to perform more loyalty than your life can hold. You are not required to keep choosing comfort over honesty just to avoid being the one who changed first. And you are not the villain for becoming someone the old shape of that relationship can no longer fit. People do not always outgrow each other because something broke. Sometimes they outgrow each other because something worked. You became someone, they became someone else. And the space between you is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of two lives, finally, honestly becoming exactly what they were always going to become.